This time, we're concluding our look into the Planet of the Apes reboot trilogy with war. And along the way, we ask, is this a war film or a sci-fi film? Is this more like Heart of Darkness or Bridge on the River Kwai? And finally, what's the future of this franchise? We are the beginning and the podcast. This is Force-Fed Sci-Fi. All right, welcome back, guys. We are completing our trilogy, Planet of the Apes, with one of your great co-hosts, Sean Michael Culp, and along with me on this wonderful journey is my friend and co-host.
I am the Colonel, Chris Rupp.
Oh, you're going with the Colonel, huh? Nice.
You know, we were talking off air just before we started recording, and there's just something so charismatic and compelling about Woody Harrelson as a military villain in this movie. I don't know what it is, but it just works in spades here.
It does. It really does. From the moment he steps on screen covered in the camouflage, you just know, like, this guy's a badass. He's fantastic.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like it's very rare when you see an actor fully envelop themselves in their character. I made this comparison recently when I was talking about the True Grit remake and Jeff Bridges, and you never once doubt in that movie that Jeff Bridges is Rooster Cogburn. And same thing here in War for the Planet of the Apes. You never doubt that Woody Harrelson is Colonel Wesley McCullough. It is fantastic.
No, you don't. He's so good. And I like how he's so physically imposing in this film. You look at him, he doesn't razzle-dazzle you with crazy guns or like the six-pack or this dude that's going to be like punching people to death. It's literally all persona. It is charisma, baby. This guy oozes it, and that's why he's so freaking good at it.
Before we get too far into the weeds of our fanboying over Woody Harrelson, so Caesar and his apes. This is after the events of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes have occurred. They come into conflict with this rogue group of soldiers that are led by Woody Harrelson and the Colonel. And so, after a brutal attack in their home, Caesar is forced to kind of go on this journey of revenge and to just make himself feel whole. But this journey kind of brings the Colonel and Caesar in a head-to-head conflict that it just seems like the ball was rolling on this right away as soon as Caesar unleashed that virus. This has been a long time coming for both Caesar and the Colonel, and it all comes head-to-head here in War in the epic conclusion of the Planet of the Apes reboot trilogy.
Very nice. I think that you really painted that picture for our listeners there. And it is a journey for him. Caesar, this is the culmination of his life. So before we get into that, obviously Caesar, Andy Serkis returns for the third and final film. He did awesome in it, right? You said Woody Harrelson, he stars in this one as our villain, the antagonist as the Colonel. Who else shows up in here?
We've also got, I was really surprised when this guy came up, but we've got Steve Zahn, great comedic actor, showing up to play Bad Ape. And I have to,
yes,
Steve Zahn is incredible in this movie. I never knew that he had this type of performance in him.
I don't think anyone did, because Steve Zahn, it's not like, we're not like poo-pooing on his career, but he's just like, as an actor, he's just not looked at like the dramatic type. You just don't look at him for crazy range. Not to, once again, to poo-poo on him. He does what he does very well as a comedic actor, but for this, it threw me as well. Once like Bad Ape showed up, I'm like, who the hell is that? This guy's great. He was so good.
I mean, I'm looking at his filmography right now. I mean, I'm seeing, credits that include That Thing You Do, You've Got Mail, Stuart Little, Riding Cars with Boys, and then in that weird period in the mid-2000s, he did Sahara, Rescue Dawn, and then kind of dropped off for a little bit. I mean, he was in the Diary of a Wimpy Kid movies, and then like 2016, 2017 is where he's back into like the main spotlight, because he did Captain Fantastic with Viggo Mortensen the year before, and then now he's in War for the Planet of the Apes, and everybody just fawned over his performance. It was amazing to see. And really, I mean, again, like you were saying, we are not poo-pooing at all Steve Zahn. He's great, he's talented, but we didn't know that he had this sort of multifaceted talent to him.
No, I didn't. Like, I always enjoyed him. I saw Sahara when I was like in the 2000s. My younger brother watched the hell out of that movie one summer. I think he watched it like 100 times, multiple times a day. So I loved him in Sahara. And then actually I did see, I was one of the few that watched Rescue Dawn. And I enjoyed that film as well. But after that, I really didn't see him in many things. And so I hope like this for his career adds a little bit more zest, because he's a hell of an actor if you give him the right role and he can work with it. Because yeah, him in this was incredible. And obviously Captain Fantastic is a great movie. I actually would recommend that if you want something good, a nice little feel-good film.
Yeah, I know that's free to stream on Netflix, so if you've got a free night, definitely check out Captain Fantastic.
But along with Steve Zahn, who else?
Toby Cabell is back to portray Koba in several flashback sequences that really kind of shake Caesar to his core. Which there was only 2 instances in the movie where those happen, but I think they're played to great effect to kind of remind Caesar of the morality and of what he is doing, because Koba was kind of the antithesis of Caesar. And Caesar is going on this journey of revenge, and by doing so, he's really kind of violating the core tenets of his life of ape together strong and ape not kill ape. And Koba is there to remind him of his shortcomings of that.
Yeah, Koba really does provide that devil on his shoulder, and it's pretty fantastic. I love how Koba seems to appear when Caesar is either experiencing like great depression, anxiety, or really close to death. And the way that they portrayed Koba in this movie, how he comes back to taunt Caesar, and even at the end where he's just like, just let go, come with me. I mean, I'm getting goosebumps now. I mean, the actor that came back did a fantastic job. I mean, it was unexpected for me seeing Koba return, and I'm glad he did for those brief moments, because it really just plays to Caesar and who he is and his guilt and how much he just wants to save the apes and save his family. And it's just great character building, great, as you put it, Koba is the antithesis of Caesar. So him still haunting him even after his death, just fantastic.
Well, I mean, that's true of every great villain and hero dichotomy. It doesn't take much of a push to make the hero become the villain. I mean, we see it all the time in just about every Batman story that comes out. It wouldn't take much to make Bruce Wayne become a Joker type villain. And I mean, heaven help Gotham if he ever decided to just say, nope, I'm a bad guy now, everybody's dying.
Yeah, exactly. He's so close. But it's those morals that keeps him in it. And I think very much like Caesar, I think Caesar, though, is a little bit better off than Batman. He doesn't hide. But maybe to Caesar's downfall, he is a kind individual. He just has so much. I feel like that's one of the reasons why so many of his problems appear, because it's I think I texted you that, where it's like, it seems like with Caesar, every time he helps the humans and he lets them go, they always come back and bite him in the ass and do something to screw him over.
Well, I mean, he doesn't have a full reason to kind of buy into that. And it was helpful in Dawn when he, let Malcolm's group back in to repair the dam. And then in this case, he lets Preacher go after that opening battle. I mean Preacher, is pretty much like the only other human in the film that gets substantial screen time that's not Woody Harrelson. And he's played by Gabriel Chavarria. And I'm just fascinated that he chose a crossbow as his weapon.
I know.
Like who do you go to in the army to say, no, I don't want the rifle that everybody else got. I want a crossbow because I want to be difficult.
Well, it's unique. It's badass. It served as a purpose, and we're talking about it, right? We're talking about him because if he just had a gun or something, it wouldn't have been, I don't think, as memorable as the crossbow. It was a very unique character choice, and we'll talk about the crossbow a little bit because it ended up serving as Caesar's demise.
Well, yeah, and I was mistaken when I said Preacher got more screen time because there's also a human that tags along with Maurice and Caesar and Luca for majority of the film there, and that's Nova, the little girl who becomes mute, played amazingly by Mia Miller. I hope I'm saying her name right, but she and Maurice form this tender attachment during the course of the movie, and it's just brilliant to watch the motion capture actress interact with Mia Miller. It was great to watch.
Yeah, she was great. Warms your heart with the little doll and everything, and she ends up assisting the apes. You know, they didn't have to save her, but they took compassion on her, and she ended up tagging along and being just such a great asset to the group. Though it was weird, right? Because it's like, especially at the end of the film, it's like, so she's just going to live with the apes now.
Yeah, I mean, it probably is going to set up like a future film or some sort of lore down the line if there is another film. I mean, because obviously
Tarzan.
There has to be something there. I mean, and I think Nova is even a callback to the original film, or one of the human characters is named Nova. I mean, it's been a minute since I've seen the original, but I think that's sort of the tie-in they were going with here.
Okay. Yeah, I've never seen them, so or maybe I've only seen that infamous scene with like the Statue of Liberty head where they're like,
you blew it up.
Yes. Isn't that Charlton Heston too?
That's Charlton Heston at his most unhinged finest, I would say, because there's so many scenes in that movie where he just yells or it just says something gruff, and it's like, okay, yeah, you're doing this the only way you know how. Like,
classic. I love it. And then rounding out the cast, I guess, is Rocket is like Terry Notary.
Yeah, I guess he served as sort of like the movement coach for the other actors in the performance capture suits.
And Judy Greer as Cornelia. I don't know if you said Judy Greer already.
No, haven't, but she's awesome. She's funny. She's on one of my favorite animated shows, Archer. She's hysterical on it.
Really? Who does she play in Archer?
She's Cheryl, the crazy secretary.
Oh my God! Yes, I did not know that. I have to rewatch that show. It's been a hot minute, but that brings even more reason to watch it. Kudos to Archer if you want a fun TV show.
Yeah, FX just absolutely crushing it on the comedies because they've also got What We Do in the Shadows back, which I'm very happy about that. We've also got Karen Konoval, who does the motion capture for Maurice. And then rounding it out, we got Michael Adamthwaite as Luca, the big Westland gorilla that goes with Caesar there, but is ultimately killed. And then we've got Ty Olson as Red, who the humans derogatory refer to as the donkey, like the main kind of traitor ape amongst the human battalion there.
Which is, to me, that's nuts, I guess, if you wanted to talk about that a little bit, because the film kind of starts off with the humans assaulting the apes. They're trying to find them. And you see, like, you know, they're squaring up in their sights. They see some apes in the trees. But then you see, like, them get tapped by Red, and he's a gorilla, you know, and you're like, what the hell? Why is he helping the humans? And that's where they start calling them donkeys. That's curious that the apes aligned with the colonel. To me, that was nuts. That was very unexpected. I don't know. How'd you feel about that?
I mean, it kind of goes against everything that Koba was trying to warn everybody about. I mean, he was saying, like, you know, the humans aren't supposed to be trusted. We're the smarter, stronger species. We should wipe them out. And the apes are smart, so I have a very hard time believing that they would all just align themselves, or at least a good faction of them would align themselves with the colonel to wipe out their fellow apes. It's boggling to me. I mean, granted, it's also 2 years after the events of the first movie, so there could have been some other splintering that happened, you know, after Caesar regained control of his group. But it's just, again, I have such a hard time believing that these apes who have spent their majority of their lives avoiding human contact, align themselves with Koba to eradicate humans, now find themselves aligned and insulted and are basically no better than pack animals for the humans.
I know. It's like maybe these were the apes that didn't care for Caesar's leadership. Because, as we talked about in Dawn, Caesar was pretty much questioned every day with every decision he made. He had his loyal supporters and then the people that aligned with Koba. Though I do feel it intriguing, as you said, that they joined the humans because Koba literally would roll over in his grave if he saw them because he hated the humans. But I think for story-wise purposes, it just made more sense for them to join the humans as opposed to have like Caesar's group, apes, and then humans, and then the army like having like a big mate. I think that would have just been too much, too many characters. So maybe, they're willing to roll over and join the humans, as long as they could be rid of Caesar. I don't know what, though, the colonel did, to get him into it, invest him. Like, what could he offer them? That's, like, the curious part to me.
There's nothing he could have offered. And even Caesar has that great interaction with Red by saying, do you really think that the colonel is just going to let you live if he wins? I mean, and that's exactly what was going to happen. If the colonel was victorious in defeating the army that was coming to kill him, I mean, the first thing he would have done was killed every single ape in Caesar's group, and then would have turned around and killed the donkeys that were under his command. That's exactly what would have happened.
I agree with you because the colonel didn't seem like the type of guy that messed around like that. He was very business, and he even killed his son, and I guess we could get into that. So in this movie, the virus mutates. And as we find out from the colonel, the virus mutates as with humans where it makes them mute. And essentially, as he says, it makes them harken back to their primitive ways as a species. So the colonel ends up killing his son because the virus mutated with him. And I think as we could see that with the colonel, as he's willing to go that far, I believe that he would have murdered the apes as well. Which leads me to say, what did you think of the colonel?
I mean, the colonel definitely felt more like a cult leader than a military leader, because we don't learn his name. I mean, we see his last name McCullough on his shirt jacket on his jacket patch there, but the entire movie he's referred to as the colonel, and the apes even call him Kerna, which almost gives him like this sort of mythical quality to him. Like even like the traitor apes hold him in such high esteem that he's almost like, some sort of demon that's supposed to be appeased. And in those moments where the colonel comes out of his shack and is looking down on his troops and shaving his head, like I got just heavy Jim Jonestown People's Temple vibes from seeing him walk out, shaving his head and addressing his troops. I mean, defacing the American flag, calling himself the Alpha and Omega. This is a cult. It's not a military battalion. This is a straight up death cult is what it is.
That's what I felt too. Because when I read the synopsis, the army, I thought that, he was the army leader. And initially, it's like, okay. It's, the world has been ravaged by this virus. The likelihood of, like, the armed forces having some sort of cohesion, sure. But once that scene appeared, I was like, this isn't the military. This is definitely a maniac, a cult leader, a dictator. This is a maniac. He abides by no one. Which then once we see the real army actually attacking the Omega group, then you're like, oh, okay, this guy is just, he went rogue. Freaking Colonel gone rogue. He wants to take out those apes.
I think we learned that pretty quick when we come across that group of dead soldiers that the Colonel all shot because they got sick. I mean, it would basically be what a cult leader did. Like, you question my authority, or you no longer believe, you can no longer hang with the group. Well, then you're excommunicated. Or if they're a truly awful person, they'll just kill them. Like, it's no different than what, like, some cults have done, killing people.
Yeah. It's his rules, his way or nobody's way. And I think that's what makes the Colonel and Woody Harrelson's portrayal of him so charismatic, but also like dangerous in a way. Very terrifying because, as opposed to Gary Oldman, who it seems like his character as the quote unquote villain just wanted to like protect his family and humans. The Colonel is just like out for blood. Like he's just like this egomaniac. I mean, he's crazy. Very, very different.
It's very interesting to note that he wants to, quote, save humanity, but fails to recognize that he has very little humanity left in himself. Like he's killed his own son, and he's gone rogue from the army, and he's willing to sacrifice all of his soldiers to, quote unquote, save humanity. So like, what is there left in himself to save at this point? I mean, he's essentially just what's no better than a death march towards his own destruction.
Oh yeah. And you could see like when Caesar approaches the Outlook after he meets Bad Ape, and Bad Ape takes them to the post where they're quarantined at. I mean, you see Ape strung up. I mean, he tortures these people. He literally makes them build this bridge, which I don't know about you, but I was getting heavy Bridge over River Kwai vibes. Like the apes are building building the wall for the group, and then the way he treats Caesar, like having him strung up, and I'm like, is Caesar supposed to be Alec Guinness? Like, what's going on here? Are they borrowing? How did you feel?
Yes, that is exactly what's happening. Caesar is Alec Guinness, and then Bad Ape is William Holden's character. That is exactly what is happening in this movie. And like, if you would have to be just you'd have to be uneducated in cinema to not see the parallels that exist in this movie, because there are so many to list. But I mean, this is done in a way that doesn't feel like it's ripping them off, though. I mean, if you're a savvy film goer, yes, you're going to recognize the Great Escape influences, the Bridge on the River Kwai influences, the Apocalypse Now influences, but it doesn't feel like it's directly ripping those movies off, though.
No. Like you said, you only would pick it up if you've seen those films. Definitely the Apocalypse Now. I felt that, especially with the face paint. I felt that, just like how the Colonel was just so crazy. The Great Escape, of course, with the tunnel. I mean, it was great little callbacks, but as you said, it was respectful. It wasn't disrespectful, and it wasn't like they were stealing in a way and redoing it. They just injected parts to enhance the story and just borrowed.
I mean, it's so much different than a film we recently talked about, Black Widow, where it felt like that film was directly ripping off other films, whereas this one, no. I mean, yes, you can certainly see the influences, but I mean, no, I would not call War for the Planet of the Apes a ripoff of any movie that's come before it.
Yes. Yes. The only way that it would rip off is if Woody Harrelson just started being like, I need to get rid of the apes. Like, he just started Marlo Brandoing hard. You just see him show up. He did gain weight. Yes, he did gain weight for the role, but not as bad as Brando.
Or if the apes all started whistling the Great Escape theme, then, like, oh, okay, we see what you did there.
Is this a spoof? What is going on here? Exactly.
But I think that's an appropriate time to ask, like, we brought up a lot of great war films, Bridge on the River Kwai, Apocalypse Now, The Great Escape. And this is a question that's kind of come up before on the show, but is this a science fiction film or is this a war film? I mean, the war is directly in the title, but does that make this a war movie?
So I would say it is more of a war film than a sci-fi film. But because of the world that it is in, talking apes, there is a virus that is mutating, that's, giving the apes the ability to reach this intellect. It's still a very sci-fi film. But I think it's a combo of both, because their war that they do, the depiction, is really well done, but it's not as like a Saving Private Ryan. It works. What do you think?
I mean, I think the war is more of a backdrop to this movie than, say, something like Saving Private Ryan. I think we knew that a war was going to happen after watching Dawn and seeing that great close-in shot of Caesar's eyes and know that a fight is coming. And I think if this sequel had come out without any sort of battle scenes or any sort of grand conclusion to the war, then I think a lot of people would have been disappointed. And I think the filmmakers made a wise choice in showing that, yes, a war is here, but this is kind of like the tail end of the war. Like it's not essential to see the minor battles or skirmishes that have led up to this point. It's important to see like how this war ends and what the future looks like for these apes. Similar to what we saw at the end of Dawn. Like we see the end of the prosperity for the apes and we see the beginning of the end for the humans. So I think that these movies really kind of capture like both the end of one era and the start of another. And I think that's what they were trying to go for with war here.
And I think they hit it on the head because it really does feel like that transitional piece where it almost feels like to me the apes are tired of the war and they're trying to escape and move on with their lives. Like Caesar, it seems like to me that he's exhausted of it because they talk at the beginning of the film, like trying to get his son comes back, blue eyes, found a place, so that they can set up shop there across the desert. And I think to me, that's why this film, it's in a warlike environment, but it's not like you don't see a lot of it though. It's more of a psychological and like a character, a hero's journey, if anything. It's because there's, some violence at the beginning and then at the end. But the majority of the film is just these guys on their journey to go save the apes. They get caught, and having his friends come and bail him out. I mean, it's interesting. It does feel like it's at the end. Like we missed most of the warring. Now it's just the tail end, and we have this crazy lunatic cult leader dictator, and then these apes, they're just like, we want to get the hell out of here before all, he's blown away like General Custard.
Well, and it's also, we see that the war becomes personal for Caesar. I mean, they've been fighting for 2 years, and I mean, nothing really has happened to Caesar. I mean, his council, for lack of a better word, is still intact. I mean, Maurice is still alive. So is Rocket. There's been a few other additions to it since the end of Dawn, but like his son is still alive. Blue Eyes is still alive. Cornelius, his other son, is becoming a young ape. His wife is still alive. And then finally here in war, like the battle comes home with the Colonel killing Blue Eyes and Cornelia. And from there, that's when this whole Heart of Darkness, Apocalypse Now revenge story kicks off for Caesar. He's not looking to end the war. He's just looking to satisfy himself and kill the Colonel, which, I mean, there's that old Chinese proverb. You should never, when starting out a journey of revenge, you should first dig 2 graves. And that's exactly what happens here. We have the Colonel dying and Caesar dying at the end of the film.
And the death of the Colonel, I don't know. That was such an emotional, very, very, very intense scene. I didn't know which way it was going to go because the Colonel ends up, spoilers, I guess, he ends up getting the virus, mutates from the doll, Nova's doll. He gets it, and then Caesar stumbles upon the Colonel laying in his bed, blood around his mouth, and he can't talk. He's mute. He just wants to like shoot himself, and he wants Caesar to do it. He and Caesar's very stressed. He really wants to frickin' kill this guy because this guy took everything from him. He took everything from him, his wife and his son, and he doesn't. The Colonel kills himself. How did you think about that suicide?
I mean, at first I thought it was Caesar's revenge being stolen from him by the virus. I mean, and it's the Colonel realizing that he's now no better than an ape. And it's that look that he was talking about when he killed his son of, recognition and anger and regret. And now it's played out on the Colonel. And I think it's more appropriate that the Colonel succumb to the thing that he feared the most, rather than having Caesar kill him. Because if Caesar killed him, it would have just proved every bias that the Colonel had. He thought that these apes, these creatures, were unintelligent. They weren't capable of anything. They were just good for work and mindless. And it would have just confirmed every bad thought the Colonel had about him. And if Caesar had killed him on the other side of that coin, his redemption would have fallen short, and he would no longer be the great ethical, peace-seeking leader that we've come to know and love over the course of these films. And I mean, in hindsight, there's probably a universe where the Colonel could have coexisted with Caesar's apes, but he allowed his fear and his arrogance to guide his decisions, and everything he tried to do to destroy the apes ultimately just led to his destruction.
It did, and it shows him with his suicide how much of a coward he actually was. Because Caesar, I think it shows him with that compassion. He basically takes compassion on him, and he doesn't do it. And it shows how great, as you said, a leader he was. And I agree. I think that's why Caesar in this film, this trilogy, he's just such a great ethical human, like an ape, a leader, because that is what he has stood by with his morals. He never compromised who he was as a character, whereas the Colonel did at some point. And he used his razzle-dazzle, his rule by force, and his persona to make people bend to his will, but at the end of the day, the Colonel ends up shooting himself alone, in his bunker, kind of like Hitler. And I think it just speaks to the character of both beings.
Well, ironic too that he's also destroyed by a doll that happens to be carrying the virus.
Which is wonderful. That is the irony of it all. You see this grandiose man who's got his stronghold, and it's this little thing that ends up taking him down. Yeah, I love it. I mean, the parallels and the storytelling, it's, it's perfect. That's why I really enjoy this film, because it didn't have, obviously the second film, it had, the big climactic battle between Koba and Caesar. But this film didn't need that. And it wouldn't have been good if it had it. So that's why I loved it, that the virus ends up taking the Colonel, as opposed to some fight between Red and Caesar, something crazy. It just wouldn't have made any sense, and it would have just been a waste of our time.
I mean, yeah, we definitely do get that heartbreaking moment where Red decides that he is with Caesar and, kills Preacher with that grenade launcher. But then Red, by doing so, I mean, he's sacrificing himself to save Caesar so Caesar can blow up the wall and the army can destroy everything. But by doing so, I mean, it also, causes this avalanche to, fall down on the base and bury all the humans, and essentially erasing humanity in a very poetic kind of way. Just, nope, you're now stuck under, feet of snow, and nobody's ever going to find you. You're wiped off the earth now.
Yeah, the last little few humans left are pretty much done. It's wonderful. It really is wonderful. I mean, this film, 2028 seems like a pretty dark place.
I mean, yeah, we're now only 7 years away from that, and this movie definitely seemed like a chilling prediction for our future. I mean, you get a sense of everything that's happening now in this film. You have this deep tribalism, this attitude of I'm right, everyone else is wrong, everybody adopting this weird savior complex, the misinformation. It's led all to the degradation of this world that we're seeing, and it's very you definitely point out the parallels to modern times when watching a movie like this. And it's I don't want to say it's sad to see, but it's angering to see it too. If you adopt it from the perspective of this could have been avoided. This world didn't have to be like it is. We didn't have to be on the brink of destruction if we'd have just not given in to any of these horrible underlying influences.
Well, I think it plays to the theme, probably, of whatever the director was going with this whole trilogy, because it's crazy, but the whole trilogy starts with one ape, and they end up being the protagonists in this whole film, and the humans are essentially the villains in the entire trilogy. Because, and I found it interesting with War that there were really, the first two, they had a bunch, and then this one, there's only one lull human, and it's a young mute girl. That's the nice one out of all of us. So I found that pretty intriguing. But overall theme, I mean, this trilogy is kind of dark. I mean, it brightens up at the end once, the apes reach paradise, where they can set up camp and finally are free from the destruction that we caused them. But I mean, overall, this whole trilogy is really dark and it's sad. I mean, Caesar ends up dying at the end due to preachers shooting him with the crossbow. I mean, it's a really dour bunch. What did you think?
I mean, yeah, you're definitely on the right track when you say that this trilogy is dark, but I think it does end on a hopeful note. But I mean, one hopeful note ending a trilogy, does not a theme for this trilogy make. And to me, I think the big theme of these films, going back to Rise, is fear. And you see fear guiding every single one of these impactful decisions. I mean, in Rise, it's Will's fear of losing his father, and also I think he's ultimately was scared of Caesar's potential and just how different he could be and how smart he could be. In Dawn, it's Dreyfus's fear of losing his community and just the fear that exists among the humans of, are the apes going to come to kill us? Like that ultimately leads to that climactic battle there. And then here in War, it's fear on both sides. It's fear from the Colonel of losing his humanity to this virus, which ultimately he succumbs to, and Caesar's fear of the future. I mean, him going off on this journey of revenge and leaving his community is something that's based partly in revenge, but also fear. It creates fear among his group, fear of the unknown, fear of death that's now made certainly real by the fact that their leader, who they've come to depend on for over 10 years, is now going off to make himself feel better.
Yeah, he does the most uncharacteristic thing that he's done in the entire trilogy. And he ends up dying because of it, instead of just sticking with his group and pressing on. In the end, it's a story. I mean, that's what we get from it. And it shows, though, because Caesar could have lived, but I think that's the point. They grow beyond him. And if the apes ever want to continue on, they will. They'll need to. They can grow and become their own, have their own leaders. And I think that's like the ultimate sacrifice that you get with that.
Yeah, I mean, Caesar's death felt earned. I think there was going to be no satisfying conclusion to this trilogy that didn't include Caesar's death, because there had to be some sort of handoff to the next generation. And I mean, Maurice he had that very sweet, tender moment where Maurice promises that his legacy will live on, his teachings will continue. Mm-hmm. I mean, so there is hope for the future of this community, and the coexistence of humans together in this community, I think, is something that can be taken away from the ending. I mean, yes, is the film dark in tone? Yes, it absolutely is. But in a similar pattern that we saw in Dawn, it's filled with a lot of these tender moments. I mean, a lot of them seem to be focused on Maurice and Nova, but again, and at the end there, you just see the apes looking mournfully at Caesar and starting to howl, at the loss of their great leader, their pillar of hope and ethics and morality here in this world. And it's I mean, I want to be hopeful that this community will continue living on, and but you never know. Like, you never know what can happen with something like this. I mean, but yes, overall, yes, this film is dark, but we're left with a very sense of mournfulness yet hope for the future for the rest of the apes.
Yes, I agree. He had such a tough life. It's crazy when you think of the start of this trilogy. Caesar was this young ape that was living with Will, and he had like everything, and how he blossoms and just becomes this leader. I mean, it's incredible, the full circle of everything. How he grows beyond everything, creates his own life, has a family, all the loss and pain and hardships that he went through. He just seems so weathered and tired by the end of this film. It's really, that's why it was so sad seeing him die, but it, like you said, it felt so earned. It was just necessary. Like, he needed to move on and like go. And so did the apes. It was wonderful. Wonderful ending.
Well, and he didn't want to become what he feared he would be. He didn't want to be vengeful. He didn't want to be angry like Koba was. And in death, he's able to let that go and be at peace, knowing his family is safe, his friends are safe, and that his legacy will live on. It's, I mean, yeah. Well, hopefully we'll get more films after this. It's something we'll talk about later, but yeah, it just ends on a sorrowful yet hopeful note. And I think that's the only way that this series of films could have ended.
As for, like, for me, lens flares and like, I didn't really have any lens flare at all. Nothing really bothered me with this film. I didn't really have any like, anything like that. Did you?
I have to agree with you. This is the rare film for me where I didn't have anything that like truly bothered me. And like, I mean, I had a minor CGI quip in Dawn, and a questionable decision by Brian Cox's character in the first movie, but like here, there's just like there's nothing I've got a problem with. This is a brilliant movie.
Yeah, it really was. Any red shirts?
There's one, and it happens in the blink of an eye, and it's my choice of red shirt is Nova's guardian, and we don't know if this person was like her father or brother or somebody, but we find out that the colonel is like, those who had children escaped and blah blah blah. And so I mean, I think we can assume that it's her dad, but we don't know if he was going to pull up his gun and start blasting away. But before he can even do that, Caesar just lowers that shotgun and just boom, just turns his chest into Swiss cheese.
Yeah, I guess, I can agree with that one. I took that as like his revenge, all anger from his family. He was just tired of humans. He's like, screw you guys. You killed my freaking family. The next human I see, boom. So I feel that. But yeah, he ends up murdering maybe her guardian. But it is what it is.
They made up for it by letting her tag along and adopting her as an ape, so it's all good.
That's right. Come with us, small child, into battle.
Yes, come with us to the most dangerous place we can possibly take you.
They are animals, after all. Did you have any toxic fandom, any yellow shirts or anything outside of a red?
I did have a bit of toxic fandom, and I mean, it's so funny. It's just, this is somebody who like clearly just saw this and just was so upset they went to IMDb. So the latest edition of This Week in Toxic Fandom. So chimpanzees cannot produce tears. Caesar's tears may be another morphological change granted by the drugs and the virus. So somebody just mansplaining how Caesar's tears couldn't possibly work since he's a chimpanzee. It's like, dude, it's a movie. The movie is called Planet of the Apes. Suspend some disbelief on your part and just accept the fact that yes, the chimpanzees may cry in the movie.
I have a I have a weapons expert. They said the colonel uses 1911 as his weapon of choice. When Caesar and another ape are brought before him, he executes the ape and turns the gun on Caesar. The hammer on the firearm is in the forward position. The 1911 has a single action trigger, so the hammer would be cocked after firing unless manually set in a desired position. So, a gun expert, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh my gosh,
that's funny.
I'm always fascinated when gun experts like take to the internet and say this wasn't right, blah blah blah.
Hey, they forgot what movie they were in. Thank you, thank you so much for the next movie that has a 1911. We'll make sure to fix it next time. Thank you so much.
Oh boy. Well, let's get into the legacy of War for the Planet of the Apes, as well as the future for this trilogy. So, similar to the success that Dawn enjoyed, this War was also well received by critics. So it currently holds a 94 on Rotten Tomatoes. There's an 82 on Metacritic, and has a cinema score of A-. So high marks all around for the internet scores. However, the box office gross was a bit less compared to what Dawn took in. This took in $490 million, but this was also a very top-heavy year for blockbusters. Like I looked at the movies that came out, and just like in the top 10 of highest grossing films on that year, there were films like Wonder Woman, Thor Ragnarok, Spider-Man Homecoming, and Star Wars The Last Jedi. So this was a blockbuster heavy year. So I think it was going to be very difficult for War for the Planet of the Apes to kind of break into that group and have a seat at the popular kids table. And continuing along with the trend that we've talked about in past episodes, this was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects, but lost that award to Blade Runner 2049. It was also nominated for 4 Saturn Awards, so for Best Sci-Fi Film, Best Director, Best Actor, and Best Special Effects. And it didn't win a single one of these awards again. They all went to different films that year. So and this is something that, again, we talked about this off air. When you look at the films that have come out in the same year that every single film in this trilogy has come out with, in 2014 specifically, you had Guardians of the Galaxy and you had Interstellar. 2 of probably the best science fiction films that have been made in the 21st century. And Dawn, that's no slight to Dawn. Dawn is still an amazing movie, but it wasn't going to beat those movies. And same thing with War here. There were so many heavy blockbusters that came out this year, and this wasn't even the best sci-fi movie that came out in 2017. For my money, that was Blade Runner 2049. And again, no slight to War, but there's no way you're supplanting 2049 in any sort of awards competition.
I know. Unfortunately, it was just a year. This whole trilogy, they released them, but unfortunately, they're great films, but they came out with even better films. So it's tough. It's a really tough awards race. But who knows? Maybe in like 10 years, people will look back at the trilogy and be like, top notch.
I mean, but fortunately, there's been no concrete announcements for a sequel to this movie. A lot of people thought that like this would be the end of the trilogy, but of course, since this made money, people want to continue a good thing. And after Disney bought 20th Century Fox, they did announce that they're going to make more Planet of the Apes films. So it's Disney. They did the same thing with Aliens. They did the same thing with Indiana Jones. So, I mean, I think it might be a safe assumption that we will get another Planet of the Apes film, but I just don't know if that's ever going to happen at this point, because there is a director that's currently attached right now, a fellow by the name of Wes Ball, and he's done a couple of films. It looks like he did the Maze Runner series of films, and he is confirmed to be a writer and director for the next Planet of the Apes film, but there's nothing here. there's no other announcements about it other than there was an announcement in May 2020 that Josh Friedman's going to write the screenplay. Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver are going to come back as producers. But I just don't know what this movie is going to look like, though. I mean, they said it's not going to be a sequel and it's going to be more of a follow-up, but there's no other indication as to what this movie is going to look like or who's even going to be in it.
I'm glad that there's nothing yet. No, I don't know. We don't need another Planet of the Apes film. Like, what are they gonna do with it? You know, like this trilogy is perfect. It tells a story. It's about Caesar. Don't go releasing more crap. Like, just let things end. God, that's like the problem with modern movies. They like take a good thing and then they're like, let's extend it. It's like, no. What can you extend upon? It told the story. The humans are done. You know, Cornelius and, you know, they're going to live their lives now without Caesar take his teachings. There's nothing else to do other than reboot the franchise. And we don't need another one. It came out when it was needed and we're good for another 30 years. Thank you very much. No, Disney. No. I mean,
I would not be opposed to maybe another sequel, maybe another trilogy. You know, it takes place further on down the line, but it's its own separate story, kind of removed from this main story here.
I mean, unless they take the route like with Charlton Heston, where now the roles are reversed, I would be okay with that. You know, like where the apes, you know, 25 years down the line, Caesar's son is just crazy bananas, you know, like he, no pun intended, but he just like, you know, he's a douchebag and hates humans. And then the humans have to rally to beat the apes to find some normalcy in life. That's fine by me. But I mean, it's like, what else like those pesky humans just won't stop attacking us. Like, it's like, you know, I feel like you can only play that card so many times.
Oh, well, like we said, there's been no concrete announcements as to a title, a cast, a release date, or even a production start date. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. But, I mean, yeah. But like you said, just let this trilogy be what it is. Let it be great. Let it stand on its own and stop making sequels where sequels aren't needed.
Yes. And with that, we're going to rate this film. We are going to rate the final film of the trilogy. It has been a blast. With our unique scale of wouldn't watch, would own, or would host a viewing party. Chris Rupp, what would you rate War?
I mean, there are a lot of great things to take away from War here. I mean, starting with the emotional depth. The emotional depth is there. It's so deep you can go swimming in it. And in spite of the word war being in the title, I think there is a lot of hope to take away from this movie. I mean, hope for the future of Caesar's community. There's, you know, hope that they can make this world be better and learn from the mistakes of the old world and make it new. And this is a welcome tonic from, you know, the popcorn fare. And there's nothing wrong with popcorn fare. I love popcorn fare. Everyone loves popcorn fare. But there's something about watching a movie where you can feel great emotional character depth, and this trilogy has it in every single one of his films. And it's one of those rare trilogies where every film is an absolute banger and worth watching. However, and this is going to be the same criticism I levied at Dawn, is it doesn't have the same entertaining quality as the original film Rise did. And again, still an amazing movie. I'd watch this anytime. It's not a movie you're going to have all your friends over to have, you know, a party, unless you're going to watch all three of these movies in a row. But I would call War for the Planet of the Apes a would own.
All right. Rock on.
What about you, Sean?
You know, I'm going to say this film is fantastic. Great story. I loved the beginning. It was very gritty. It did embellish all those movies. I did enjoy the callback to, you know, Bridge over River Kwai. That film to me is a very personal film that I enjoy. I love Alec Guinness. So the callback to that was great. I'm going to put this as a would own as well. I think it is missing that element that the first film had, where you're just like, holy crap, this is amazing. However, I think this film really hones in on Caesar, and he is our main protagonist throughout the series, and it just makes you appreciate his journey and how far he came from being, the little ape from the beginning. So I love that. I love that about this film in hindsight, looking back. But I think to really enjoy this film, you have to watch it in sequential order with all three. It's a tough film to just like start up on by itself unless you know the backup history to it all. So that's why I would put this as a would own. But it's wonderful. It's wonderful. So much emotion. The payoffs. This series was so well directed, well written, well produced. Everything in this was just fantastic. Great series. Great movie. I'm so happy I watched that. Sean would give this a would own. And thank you, Chris, for enriching my life with this trilogy. You are the man.
Yeah, I'm just glad you were along for the idea of doing this trilogy of films, because like when the first movie came up, I was like, we now have to talk about the other ones, because it's impossible to talk about Rise without talking about Dawn and War. So yeah, I'm glad we went on this journey and did a suite of episodes. We haven't done one of these in a while, so it felt good.
Amen to that, brother. Well, unfortunately, now it is the end of this trilogy, so now we must continue onward. Calling Major Samantha. It's been a while.
Yeah, we've given Major Samantha a nice break to kind of rejumble the list and come back with, her latest command of what to watch next time, which I'm sure is going to be a bit of a letdown after watching 3 great films. So, using Major Samantha, and from our list of 118 films, she has selected number 38. It is a film from the year 2000, directed by Roger Christian and starring John Travolta. It is Battlefield Earth.
Oh, no. Are you scrapping me? No. Wow. You go from A+ to that? Holy crap. Oh, my God. I can't wait.
I can't either. I've never seen it, so I'm looking forward to just absolutely ruining that movie.
Oh my God. All right, dude.
I'll try to go in with a blank slate, but we've got 21 years of critical analysis behind that movie, so we may be in for a rough ride.
I can't believe it. It's finally here. Well, sweet, man. I'm stoked. Until next week, my man. It has been a pleasure.
Oh, likewise. And if you all enjoyed today's episode, please head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. That really is the best place to do it, and it really helps to drive us up the charts as well as help people like you find the show. We are across the spectrum of social media with Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all at ForceFed Sci-Fi. You can check out and download episodes from Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, or wherever you find podcasts, and go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Finally, you can check out our website, ForceFedSci-Fi.com, for show notes and links to all of the social media. So for all of us at the ForceFed Sci-Fi team, we will see you next time.